Disney's DAS Pass, how to sign up, what it is, using it in the park. We're covering it all on this week's Magic Chat.
Two other scenarios where it's great to use it that I don't think people always realize is so we learned this on our last trip. I actually didn't know this.
Melissa, I'm like,
Yeah, I was too. I think that's what people miss. Like you're not.
hey, welcome to today's episode. So I have Melissa here with us. We're going to be going over the Disney's DAS Pass, and the DAS Pass is the Disability Access Service Pass. I always get that messed up. It's a program offered at Disney World and Disneyland theme parks to assist guests who just kind of have like a difficulty maybe tolerating the extended waits in like a conventional queue. So they allow this due to any type of disability, and I think it's kind of like sometimes invisible disabilities as well. So we have Melissa. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me. So excited to be here, and yeah, and talk about DOS It's a very important process to go through at Disney.
Yeah, and so Melissa and I have both used the DAS. I know I say it with like a different, I don't know, like an accent or whatnot. Um, so she is like an expert in DAS and, just all things Disney. But from things like signing up to it, using it in the parks, even alongside Genie Plus, that's, yeah, definitely like a hot thing that I can't wait to get into that. So Melissa, can you just kind of like share how you first like how or when you first discovered the DAS Pass?
Yeah. So when my family actually started going with our children, so like me, my husband, my two kids, and we went our first trip in October 2016 with extended family. And my nephew is neurodivergent and he required the DOS pass. So he's about 6 years old at the time,
Okay.
5 years, 6 years around there. And he used it. So that was the first time I actually had exposure to it, and used it via my sister and him. And
Okay.
it was super helpful. I could see how helpful it was for him, just between breaks from the crowds and not being able to wait and then having him get overstimulated. It was a really helpful tool for him to have.
Yeah.
And it was so through him that I started initially being exposed to the DOS pass.
Okay. And so you had mentioned it was one of your family members, and then has anyone else in your family also used the DAS Pass? Would you
I
mind
actually
sharing
use
that?
it now.
Okay.
And last year was actually my first time using it myself. But I do
Okay.
have several friends and like extended family members that have used it for various reasons,
Yeah.
whether it be allergies or a disease of some kind,
Hmm.
anxiety. I actually use the DOS Pass because I suffer from hemiplegic migraines. So
Okay.
it was something that over time that I realized that, oh, wow, like I'm spending a lot of time not in the park for a
Mm-hmm.
condition that I have.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I was able to qualify. I mean, we've probably went on 7 or 8 Disney trips without it.
Yeah.
Um, and I would always have at least 1 or 2 days where I would lose part of the trip, whether it be a
Okay.
morning, a full day, or maybe have to leave the park because I just didn't feel well.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like there's kind of like a gap between that 2016 trip and then just recently using it.
Yeah,
You said you went on like 7 or 8 trips without it. That's a lot.
it is a lot.
So
It
what I
is.
guess kind of like triggered you to just look into it like for yourself?
Um, I think realizing that friends and family members were able to utilize it for their reasons, whatever it might have been, and knowing that I was missing park time, and then also understanding the more I helped clients. Because I work one on one with clients to help them plan trips,
Uh-huh.
whether it be booking or just planning services. That
Yeah.
is something that I do. Really, truly understanding all of the parts and pieces of the process helped me realize, wow, I should be using this. Like this is helpful.
Hmm.
And I think I said I would try it. I think often sometimes when you have sort of a like hidden or like non-visible disability, you
Yes.
feel like you're
Yes.
not deserving of it. And I very much
Uh-huh.
felt that way. But I said, you know what, I'm going to try it. I was immediately approved. And it was a really great experience.
That's awesome. I think, I mean, you and I had kind of discussed this before, but there's that kind of feeling, because, like, background, so I've used it for my son, and then I also just very recently, for the first time, used it for myself. But I feel like there was a few trips that we didn't go on, and I had questioned, like, would we qualify? Like, we don't
Mhm.
need this. Like, it just felt not like an imposter syndrome, but almost to the sort. And I feel like that's common for
It is.
people. Yeah.
It definitely is, and that imposter syndrome, that's definitely a good way to explain it.
Yeah, it's you don't wanna feel like you're, like, taking it on, but, yeah, it's we struggled with, even just doing it, and so Melissa, she's the one that really inspired or encouraged me to, just talk to them. Like, there's nothing that's gonna hurt, having the one-on-one interview with them to see if you qualify. If you don't, like, that's fine,
Yeah.
but, if you do, even better. So, yeah, that's why we started using it. Melissa was great with that when she was planning our trip.
Yeah, and
Our
it was helpful. I appreciated, allowing me the opportunity to help you, but also talk through it because
Yeah.
it's definitely hard. It's not
Uh-huh.
a thing to say, "Oh, I have a
Yes.
disability," like, and this will be helpful for me. So
Mhm.
it's definitely, a big decision to make,
Yeah.
and to try.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I definitely remember being on our chat and being a little emotional about it because it was something that was just kind of, like, new forming, wrapping around my brain and all that. So yeah, you were honestly great with just walking me through that and just, yeah, being great with that. All right. So once we get over that hurdle of, gaining that confidence just to apply for the DAS pass, do you mind walking us through just kind of like
Sure.
the basic steps of, okay, I want to apply. What do I do next?
Yeah, the process is pretty straightforward, and I actually have a DOS info sheet if anyone wants to grab that.
Yes, we'll
You
link
can
that. We'll
find it
definitely
linked
will.
at my Instagram, Happy Hans Plan Magic, or on my
Hmm.
website, Foolish Mortal Planning Co. But it's a great, it just literally takes you through every step of the process, which is pretty straightforward. There's two parts to it, which are really key. With DOS, you can either pre-register, which I highly recommend, because when you pre-register, you get pre-selections, which are probably the best part of using the DOS pass, that you go into the park day having two rides already selected for you. So that's always big.
Yes.
But you, first and foremost, you need to have a My Disney Experience account. You need to be logged into that account, and you also need park tickets linked, right? So you'd have to have all of that first, and then your window for registration opens 30 days prior to your first park day, not when you check in, park day,
Hmm.
and you start with a video chat. You connect. You go to the disability access page when you're logged in. You start that process, and it'll connect you. I will say the wait times vary,
Yes.
and whoever is, I knock on wood, it's been better. Most of my experiences have been 20 to 30 minutes, although
Hmm.
there was a point where wait times were very long, hours long.
Oh,
But that seems to have been improved greatly. I would say accommodate more time if you're going at a higher crowd, right? Because more people will be applying.
hmm.
So you start with that video chat. You do have to have the person with you who is applying. So if it's not yourself, it's a child or another adult, make sure they're with you. You will talk to that cast member. You will explain to them first and foremost why, what is requiring you to need it. And then also just be clear about why you can't tolerate long waits. One of the big things for me, just as an example, everyone is different, but heat is a really big factor for me. And it's hot in Disney World. So whether that the intense heat can bring on a migraine, which would cause me to have to either leave the park, leave the line, or if the day before was really bad for me, I might wake up with one and then not be able to get to the park at all. So just I want to say that part lasted maybe 2 to 3 minutes, five max. Once they approve you, they put you into a text chat. There'll be a chat box that opens up. And then from there, you now complete a form. They give you a link. And based on your park days, you select the park that you're going to, since park reservations are no longer required, except for dated tickets, at least. If you have annual passes or things like that, or non-dated tickets, you may require to already have a park reservation. They'll link you to a form. So you'll say, okay, on Monday, May 5th, I'm going to Epcot, and these are my recommend, or my preferences for the pre-selections. So not every ride is included in the pre-selections. In that DOS info sheet I mentioned, I do include all of them. I highly recommend having an A and a B set. So, you can go in and you can say, okay, you can't pick a specific time, but you can say, I want morning, afternoon, evening. That gets submitted to the cast member in the chat, and then they come back to you with the pre-selections and add them to your My Disney experience. You can choose to select them, or you can go back to them and say, hey, can you give me something else? They also do look at, they're connected to your account, so they'll also look at reservations that you might have, or other tours and things like that you might have planned, and they'll book them around them. It's not a perfect system. Sometimes you don't get what you want. But it does give you those two pre-selections, which have an hour entry window similar to Genie Plus, and you can plan your day around them.
I think those pre-selections are so awesome,
Mhm.
especially when you can get them like at the 30-day mark and you have a
Yeah,
lot more like opportunities of different times and stuff and really like fit
definitely.
them into your day. But I think you have a good point of you kind of need to go into the chat with knowing what pre-selections you do want to make and how that's going to like fit into your park day. But
Definitely.
just like talking about the whole like video chat, I think going into it just with like anxiety type stuff, it always makes me nervous. I don't know why, but the cast members have always been just so sweet and
They are.
understanding. I've gotten a cast member that said, I use DAS for myself, so like I get this. And it just, you go into it so nervous, or I do at least.
I
And
did too. I was like, I don't know, what am I going to say?
yeah.
Like, what's going to happen? So it went really smoothly though, and they were super kind.
Mhm.
And then worst case, if you miss that window, you have 30 to 2 days before your trip, right before your park day. You can also do it on site. You just don't get the pre-selections.
And so you had shared about these pre-selections, and maybe they're not always the best time to fit into your park day.
Yeah.
I've had a few of those where like, yeah, we'll just choose that one. So from that, how do you kind of like plan for using DAS once you're in the park?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like any park day that I plan, we started planning this way really because of my own disappointment on our first trip. We had a great trip, but I did not went home not riding my favorite ride, the Haunted Mansion,
Oh.
and it was really disappointing. So one thing that I shifted just from years of like corporate goal setting and understanding project management, that's what I do in my career.
You're
Um,
amazing. I love that how
I don't know
you
about that.
transferred those skills.
But
Yeah.
utilizing, taking those skills, we started setting intentions for our trip, setting those
Okay.
priorities. What are the must-dos? And
Hmm.
everyone on who's going. So if it's the four of us, I set my 3 to 5 per park day, my husband, my kids, and we make
Hmm.
sure that we plan around them. But
Okay.
then taking into account those pre-selections, how do they kind of weave into the plan?
Yeah.
So just as an example, like Hollywood Studios is a great one because they
Uh-huh.
do have a lot of great pre-selection options there. You can get smugglers, you can get Slinky Dog. So it's like fingers crossed and you hope you get them, right?
Oh,
So
for
if
sure.
you get Slinky Dog from say 10 to 11 a.m. as your pre-selection, then you're going to start your day in Toy Story Land. So
Oh,
you're going
yeah.
to enter the park, you're going to, look at your knowing your priorities and say, okay, like Toy Story Mania is a priority. I'm totally, making this up. So maybe
Yeah,
I'm
I
going to
love
do
it.
that before. So when I enter the park and you get your what I call the day of selections for
Uh,
DOS, you enter the
uh-huh.
park, you pick your first one. That would be Toy Story Mania, right? And then do that. Then Slinky Dog, and then move on from there. And I always recommend doing it by section so that you're not backtracking, you're not going all over the park. One,
Mm,
it's
yes.
tiring for everyone, whether you have DOS Pass or not. That's tiring, especially in parks like Magic Kingdom and Epcot that are huge.
Uh,
Hollywood Studios is not as big of a deal because it is a smaller park, but you want to definitely keep that forward moving flow so that you're not bouncing all over the place. So that's typically how planning a day with DOS or really any day goes, taking into account those top priorities, where are they in the park, and then in the case of DOS, those pre-selections and how can you utilize them best.
yeah. And so you had said once you enter the park, then you're going to make your DAS selection.
Yep.
Can we pause real quick with like the in-park plans and just kind of like walk through the steps of using it once you get
Sure.
into the park?
Yeah. So you have to scan in, and everyone would have to scan into the park physically. Once you do that, it basically activates your DOS pass. You'll see when you go into My Disney Experience app, you're on your main page, and then you hit what I call that hamburger button, the three lines at the bottom right. You'll see a square pop up where it says DOS,
Like
and you'll
magic.
go into there. And it opens that portal. So you have to be registered in order for that to happen, right? So you would need to be registered already. If you haven't pre-registered, you'd need to go to guest services first before you can
Good
do it,
point.
of course. And then you'll see all of the rides that are listed. It's every ride that has a lightning lane in the park, because I think that's another key too to talk about is when you use
Mhm.
DOS, you're entering via the lightning lane. So those lightning lanes can get backed up, right? People, especially if it's an individual lightning lane, you can purchase those, or not purchase. You can select those for DOS. So be mindful of that. Other people are going to be entering via the lightning lane, but it's going to greatly reduce your wait. So you're going to see that full list of rides that are included, or attractions and shows for that matter, any experience. And you're going to pick that first one. It's going to tell you when you can enter. And it's based on the standby wait. So you are virtually waiting in line. So whereas with Genie Plus, if people are familiar with that, you're picking a time slot and entry time. With DOS, you're virtually waiting. So if the wait's 30 minutes, then you might have typically it's like less the wait. So maybe an hour is better. If the wait is an hour, you're going to get anywhere between a 30 to an hour wait, depending on the flow of people in the queue. And it'll
Mhm.
give you an entry time. So you'll still get that entry time, but it doesn't expire. So you'll go in, you'll select it, and then you'll just virtually wait in line for that entry time.
And so when you're virtually waiting, and this can kind of tie in like the use with Genie Plus, what are your suggestions to do in between that time?
Yep. Another great question. That is when, especially for parks that have a lot of rides like Magic Kingdom or a lot of
Mhm.
headliners like Hollywood, I feel like those are the two big ones that I would use, maybe, or at least consider using both. You can be using Genie Plus and stack rides in between. You could use what I call filler rides that might have lower weights for the standby. Like, so in Magic Kingdom, that might be like Dumbo or Mad Tea Party, things
Mhm.
that maybe you're waiting 5 minutes and you can tolerate that kind of weight. Depending where you are throughout the day, snacks and lunch you can buffer. You can also buffer it with parades and experiences. One thing I love to do, especially in Magic Kingdom, is if I'm entering the park, I still have to get in, right? I have to get through Main Street. So I can start that wait going and take castle pictures, maybe meet a character, shop a little bit before I even get back to where I need to go.
Yeah,
So I think that
true.
also buffers some wait times as well. And then again, utilizing those pre-selections would help as well, because you could have, in the example I gave before, you could have Toy Story Mania scan in. And when you scan in, you can pick your next one, have your entry time for Slinky, and then have Alien Swirling Saucers waiting for you when you get off Slinky. So you can also manipulate it, I guess, in that way so that you're kind of stacking rides.
I love that. That's ideal. I mean, we're in our Toy Story area, so that whole scenario, that is us.
Yeah.
Yes, all of that. We'll probably, go to Woody's Lunchbox and you get a mobile order of something
Yeah.
too.
Some tots.
Yeah, and meet some characters while we're at it. That's like ideal morning for us. So
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, and very relatable for like, other, young families that on how they can use this. I love that. All right. And so you did mention virtual queue, and I think sometimes I've heard kind of like differing information on this that you can't join it for a virtual queue like Guardians or Tron, but you can.
You absolutely can. And actually, so with the individual lightning lanes or the virtual queue, so you have the two rides that have a virtual queue. If you want to use DOS, you need to join the virtual queue, so at 7 a.m. or 1 p.m. in the park. Or if you have extended evening hours, at Magic Kingdom or Epcot, you could also do the 6 p.m. on those days, the Monday, the Wednesday. You do have to join the virtual queue. And then you go up to the great cast members that are at the front of the rides, and you let them know you have DOS with a lot of kindness. And then you can enter via the lightning lane. So you do, the one challenge with any virtual queue is you do have to wait for your boarding time. So you grab the virtual queue, you get it, you wait for your boarding time, you walk up and you let them know, hey, I have DOS Pass. They switch something on their iPads and then let you again, you scan in and you can enter via the lightning lane. So
Okay.
if you're not wanting to purchase the individual lightning lane for those rides, you can actually you can do it that way.
Is there anything that you can't, like, use it to ride or,
Mhm.
just you can't use it for?
Pretty much, if it doesn't have a lightning lane, in regards to rides, then you're not going to be able to use DOS for it. There are shows and experiences that don't, that you can use it for. So, like, there's, a couple of shows and also
Yeah.
parades where they'll have like a Genie Plus
Mhm.
option. So it's the same with DOS. You can do those and they
Okay.
have like separate seating areas. I don't typically recommend using it for those just because it kind of seems like a waste unless there is a real reason. I mean, if just making sure that you have a spot for a priority show, then totally go ahead and do it. But pretty much if there is a lightning lane, then you can use DOS for it.
Okay. And another use that I was tripped up on, and again, just misinformation that was out there, special ticketed events like the Halloween party,
Yep.
Christmas party. Can we use it there?
You can. There is a 1 hour transitional period where it kind of blacks out, but you can
Hmm.
still use it. So, with the after hours events, you can typically you get entry around 4 o'clock. And in the case of the Not So Scary and the Mickey's Very Merry, Jollywood was a little
Hmm.
different. It started later, but you get entry, right, and the park is still open from 4 to about 6-ish. It officially starts at 7, but by 6 o'clock, they're starting to get people out. So at that time, it's just regular use. You can go into the app, the park is open. So when you scan in, you can start using DOS, no problem. From 6 to 7 is where it gets tricky. The entire system goes down because they're preparing for the party. So what
Hmm.
you do at that time is you walk up to the rides, to the queue, and you let the to the lightning lane entrance and let the cast members know that you do have DOS. Typically, if there's no wait or the lines aren't long, they'll let you walk right on. However, like for Not So Scary, for example, um, Haunted Mansion tends to get backed up, right? I mean, it's the Halloween party, it's
Yes.
Haunted Mansion, so they may say, "Come back in 20 minutes," and they'll actually
Oh,
manually put it in your My Disney Experience app.
okay.
And then you can still walk up to other rides and enter while you wait. There's no like you can actually do more than one at once. So that's super helpful. And then once 7 o'clock, once the party starts, it goes back to using it normally. You can go right in, you can select your DOS, super easy. And now it's like everything's immediate because lines are shorter to begin with. So
Hmm.
the you're pretty much getting, immediate entry on everything. Two other scenarios where it's great to use it that I don't think people always realize is early entry. If the park is open, you can use it. So
Oh, I didn't
sometimes
know
there's a
that.
little, yeah, yeah. Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay with early
Okay.
entry. So like Magic Kingdom, for example, early entry might be 8:30, but they'll let you in at 8:15. From 8:15 to 8:30, you can't use it. But as soon as the park is officially open for early entry, you can start using it. So that's one great tip to know because I don't think people realize that.
No.
And then in the last hour of the park being open, you'll often find a lot of the waits are beyond the park being
Yeah.
open time. So we learned this on our last trip. I actually didn't know this. So we were
Okay.
at Hollywood Studios. We had hopped, and everything had long waits, and we were like, "Oh, like that was one challenge." And I was like, "I wish we bought Genie because we could have stacked. Like I would have
Mhm.
had my evening stacked." Lesson
Yeah.
learned. If you're hopping from anywhere to
Always.
Hollywood Studios, especially, stack those rides. But
Uh-huh.
because we had to wait till we scanned into the park to start selecting, back then the park hopping was a little different. It was after 2 p.m. So anyhow, we were doing like random things that had short waits because
Mhm.
we only had one entry and it was at like 7:45 for Mickey's Runaway Mickey and Minnie. And
Okay.
so we wound up getting I want to say Toy Story Mania at like 8:45. So we walked up, we're like, is there any way we can enter early? And they're like, oh, you just walk up in the last hour and we give you entry. So you just
What?
again have to tell them you have DOS and it'll either be immediate, just like it was at the Halloween party, or they might say come back in 10 minutes. So we
Oh,
were able to
wow.
do all of Toy Story Land in the last hour, just going boom, boom,
Oh.
boom, because we told them we had DOS. I had no idea.
Wow, that
Yeah,
is a
because you can't
huge
virtually
tip.
wait in a line that's longer than the park being open.
Melissa, I'm like,
Yeah, I was too, because my kids were upset. They thought our last trip was very different. We did a resort focus trip, so we really only had the
Okay.
one park day. So
Oh,
they were
got
like,
you.
"Well, we want to ride Slinky." I'm like, "I'm sorry, I can't." Like, we either have to wait in the line for the entire hour, or we need to forego it. So learning that was huge.
Oh,
I just wish I
yeah.
had known it at 8 o'clock, not 7:45. But
Right
we
at
did
that.
them all in like 15-20 minutes.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
so awesome. And they got to ride Slinky,
they
so I
did
bet
get to
you're
ride Slinky. They were
mom of the year. Oh, yeah. Great
We didn't get
job.
to go over to Galaxy's Edge, but that's okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, same here. It's all about Slinky Dog. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So, oh my goodness, you've shared like just such great information, like all around this. But I kind of want to go back to like the beginning, and you using DAS, and just kind of like how has DAS, changed your Disney trips since you're now using it?
It's definitely helped, more than I can say. Th Really, the ability to not have any, like, worry or anxiety about me getting a migraine and missing out on half a day.
Uh
Um,
huh.
yes, we could, in theory, still be purchasing Genie Plus and selecting rides, but if we're not going to the park, then those rides, the money is wasted and those
Mm-hmm.
time slots are gone, right? Like we've surpassed them. So
Yeah.
I think just the level of stress, anxiety around that, it's certainly not every park day, but just having that level of knowing, okay, we can get these done and we can get them done quickly if
Mm-hmm.
I lose part of a day, is definitely a relief.
Yeah.
Because
Uh,
going home sad because you didn't get to ride something is not, especially a priority or a favorite ride.
oh yeah.
That sucks. I've experienced that
Agreed.
and it's not fun. So it's definitely been a help in that regard.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. Are there any times that you don't use DAS? You'd shared that one day you didn't use Genie Plus, but are there days where maybe you don't use DAS or use it as often?
Definitely. I think it depends a lot on the crowds, right?
Hmm.
So we tend to go in the summer because that's when our kids are off school and that's the time frame that works. So the crowds do tend to be lower.
Hmm.
Um at, in Epcot, for example, World Nature, a lot of those rides you can walk right on. Unless something broke down. We did have an experience last year where I think it was Remy's and Frozen and Test Track were all down at the same time.
Oh,
So we were
goodness.
like waiting for the land because my entire family loves that ride. Like, my kids
Hmm.
and my husband are obsessed with it, and usually you
Oh,
walk right on, right? Maybe
yeah,
5
yeah.
minutes. We waited 25 minutes for the land, and I was like, "What's happening?"
You're like, why are you guys here?
So, that does happen, but we didn't have, an entry we could use, right? Because we already
Mhm.
had selected one. We hadn't scanned into the next ride.
Okay.
And I wasn't willing to give up even though Remy's had gone down, it hadn't yet. Sometimes they'll turn it into, like, that multi experience
Hmm.
and you can then use it for anything. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
am not giving up my Remy's because that was a long wait.
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah, so we hadn't used it for all of those rides, the Seas, the Land, and Figment.
Uh-huh.
And normally you walk. I mean, pretty much though those are tend to be walk on. So those are usually the cases where I won't use it, or if I'm not already using it for the longer waits. I think that's what I usually tend to do is either like the individual lightning lanes or the rides that are the longest waits are what I will kind of focus on using them for. And if I
Yeah.
need to get that wait going, because you are virtually waiting, I think that's what people miss. Like, you're not just grabbing a time slot and walking right in. Um,
Uh-huh.
and you do still need to do that virtual wait. So areas like that, I won't typically use DOS. It's just
Okay.
not necessary. And I mean, we don't typically use early entry, but early entry sometimes you don't need it either.
Uh-huh.
But if you can just walk right on instead of waiting 10 minutes, why
Yeah.
not?
Yeah, definitely. I think thinking back to our trips, if we have like a Genie Plus day and we're able to, hit a bunch of rides, I find that maybe we've only used DAS for like maybe one or two rides.
Yep.
But then we also have some days, like if we're going to Epcot and we're doing like a festival focus day, and we're kind of really spending a lot of time in the World Showcase, again, like we're not using DAS all
Yeah.
that much. So I think for us, like, because I still utilize Genie Plus a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and having that kind of as our like backup, I think that just like kind of provides the sense of or lowered anxiety, knowing that that's there. And so also going back, someone's on the fence and unsure if they would qualify. What would you kind of, say to coach them through that?
I would say sit back, take a deep breath, and think about the reasons you can't wait. Why is there a reason that you can't tolerate that wait? Or is there something that's holding you or keeping you from being at the park either for a full day, part of a day? And if it's helpful, write that down because sometimes seeing it on paper is like, oh, wow. Like if I think
Hmm.
back to the amount of days that I missed and I paid for those tickets,
Yeah.
that's huge.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, like I if it's affecting your trip and your well-being or your family's well-being, then try it. It definitely might be a helpful resource for you. And I will say typically, some people have multiple issues, right? They might have a mobility issue and they have a scooter and that is or a wheelchair or something like that. And that is accommodated via I'd say majority of the line queues. Most queues these days don't have stairs, don't have anything, or they have an elevator option where you can, cut through. And so if it's just that, I will say, cast members typically won't approve. But if it's that plus, something that keeps you from tolerating long waits, try it. Talk to them, and see what they say. They're not, I've never had anyone be rude, cast members, like,
Hmm.
you don't deserve it. They're not. I'm certain, especially these particular types of cast members are trained to, be extra kind and talk to people. If you're unsure what to say, talk to them. Be like, hey, I have this and this is what happens. I'm not sure if that qualifies, but these are the reasons I think I do. And let them know, and they'll have that conversation with you.
Yeah, I think that's perfect because I feel like that was a lot of our conversation and just like the realization. I kind of got like goosebumps through that, just kind of like taking me back to that conversation. So, yeah, applying doesn't hurt. I mean, the worst
It
thing you can
doesn't.
say is no.
Yeah,
And like you said, they are so just kind, and I think just come from a very understanding place that even if it is a no, then it's not the end of the world.
yeah, definitely.
You have given us plenty of awesome tips along the way. Are there any last little tips or tidbits that you want to share about DAS?
Oh my goodness. I think really just going in with a plan and knowing, the priorities is key. And, making sure that, once you scan in that you start selecting, continue selecting. And then even if you're taking a midday break, if you leave that park and are going back to that park, you can stack with it if you would. Like you won't be able to get multiple, but if you scan into a ride and then exit the park, you can pick one before you leave so that when you return, it's waiting for you. So that is definitely, I think, another thing that people don't realize that's a helpful piece of information. But
Hmm.
it does not start until, or at least the day of ones do not start until you scan in. So always be mindful of that. If you have a breakfast in the morning, I know a lot of times like what we've done is maybe you go to Topolino's or Cape May Cafe and then enter via Epcot via the International Gateway entrance. If you have the time and want to scan in so you can select your first ride, you can do
Yeah,
that to start your wait. And if not, no worries. When you scan in, it'll be waiting for you.
that's smart.
Hmm.
Especially for Cape May because it's right there. Yeah,
Yeah,
just go scan
exactly.
in real
Exactly.
quick.
It
Super
is. It's
smart.
right there.
Another,
So it's helpful.
yeah. Cape May is another just super awesome thing that Melissa actually turned me on. It was like totally one of my favorite character dinings. I know there's some, far superior, but yeah, I really loved Cape May. So
Yeah, it's a
just
cute one. And it's nice to have like almost in your back pocket of, hey, if I wanted to get Topolino's and I couldn't, or I wanted to get Ohana and I couldn't, it's a great option. You're still going to have a great experience.
yeah,
And it's
yeah.
better than some others. I'm not going to, it is better than others.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. It was super fun. And I mean, you definitely kind of shared your knowledge, obviously, with DAS, but then just how you kind of plan trips for yourself, but then your clients as well, and how you help them through Genie Plus and DAS and planning their itineraries for their day. I know that you offer just awesome services. So can you just share about, what you kind of do with clients and whatnot?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have basically two ways where I can help people plan their trips. As a my own business, Foolish Mortal Planning Co. I offer one-on-one services, so it could be a single package or a three pack, where we'll hone in on a piece of your trip, or for the three pack, it's the full trip planning, which is similar. That pack is similar. I actually partner with a travel agency as a travel agent, travel advisor.
Mhm.
And so clients that book with me basically get that plan for Magic Package service included with their booking. So there's like two ways. And depending on the level of service, we're looking at your full trip during a first meeting where we'll lay out your park days, reservations, and things like that. I actually book dining for clients and give recommendations, utilizing surveys. Like clients kind of give me and filter information to me so that I can then take that information and plan the trip, recommend dining. And then the last piece is prioritizing Genie Plus attractions or DOS selections to create park itineraries. And I think this is the piece that people love most. Um, I have a Google Doc called a calendar template, and you have all of your basic plans at the top, but then at the bottom you have all the rides by park, by section, which I color code and number as a recommendation, right? The goal is to be flexible
Mhm.
based on the priorities and the rides that they've selected and indicated that they want to do. I provide clients with a list, and how to select, whether that be using Genie or DOS or both, and then written instructions. So there's like a visual and a written instruction so that when we're meeting, they don't have to like be writing everything down like
Yeah.
crazily. And it's something for them to follow with
Mhm.
little bits of tips and information like, hey, if you can align these two, they're next to each other, like that would be great. Or if you'd run out of time in Fantasyland, it's okay. You can go back to it later. It's in the center. You're not too deep in the park. So little things like that. And that's pretty much like the full planning that I do. I personally love the planning the park itineraries because it really connects back to like the intentions that they're setting, but also the knowledge of the park that I have.
Mhm.
Um, and putting that all together in a package to help people and help them not feel stressed, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, that's the goal. You want to remember your trip. You don't want to be constantly, what's next? What are we doing? And running all
Mhm.
over the place.
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I always think that like the prep is the biggest piece so
Yeah.
that way when you get to the vacation you can enjoy it
Hmm.
and yeah,
Definitely.
definitely not getting there and having to like stand in the middle of the park and guess like, oh wait, what way should we go or especially the crisscrossing. No, thank you.
Tiring. It is so tiring, and I've seen people do it because one of the methods I know that people do use, especially with Genie, is like, "Oh, just pick whatever's the closest immediate entry," and that I think that can work for especially if it's, older children or,
Mhm.
adults, where they can go all over, but at the end of the day, you're still gonna be tired if you're back and
Oh
forth
yeah.
from Tomorrowland to Adventureland to Fantasy to and back and forth. It's just as
Makes me exhausted
it
thinking
can
about
be
it.
very draining. So,
It
if you can just
especially in the
kind of
heat.
go in a flow that makes sense, even if there's
Mhm.
a little bit of backtracking, like I find
Yeah.
especially at Animal Kingdom, it's inevitable that there's going
Uh-huh.
to be some backtrack because of the waits in Pandora
Mhm.
and just the way that the park's laid out, but minimizing it is key.
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree with that. Well, Melissa, you have shared like a ton of just like golden information, and I really appreciate it. Some things that
You're welcome.
I've learned as well, but super great tips on using DAS. So thank you all for joining us. If you found this helpful, definitely please hit the like and make sure to subscribe for more upcoming Magic Chats. And then if you're planning a Disney or Universal trip, you're going to want to get in touch with Melissa. I'll leave her information and links down in the description. So definitely click away with those. And if you have any questions related to DAS or even just Disney, feel free to leave them in the comments. I know I'll be answering them, and I'm sure Melissa will pop in as well. So thank you, and we'll see you in the next Magic Chat.